did very well in the SEAL teams at a young age. I came in at a very young age. I actually joined the Navy at 17, 18 and 19 years old when I went through SEAL training. Excelled, made my way up to a lower level leadership position as a young enlisted SEAL, became a SEAL instructor, got recommended for a commission, became a SEAL officer. When we start to excel, especially at a young age, we tend to get a little ego and a little arrogant. And I started to do that. I started to think that I was really better than I was. And unfortunately, that led to my downfall and almost ended my career. I almost got myself kicked out. Thankfully did not, and started a new long path and a new journey, a leadership journey to redefine myself and figure out what it is to be an effective leader. That is my mission in this life now. How do I help the average everyday person to be better, be a better leader, be a better human, be a better mom, be a better dad, be a better business owner, whatever it is.
It's interesting because you go to all these different places, and when you're a Navy SEAL and your story is as prolific and intriguing and unbelievable as yours, people often ask, I don't care if you're as boring as I am, people ask me all the time, what do you do? It's the first thing they ask you. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't stand that question. Ask me about who I am, ask me my name, and I'll tell you some things about us as humans, but let's get to know each other, not just what we've done in our lives up to this point that we would consider successful or unsuccessful, because it's those traits you're talking about that I'm so intrigued in. So, that's such a cool thing that you acknowledge.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a fact. That's another thing that I will sometimes teach. That's a Western culture thing. We define ourselves by our profession. So it's almost the very first question we all ask, oh, what do you do? And funny, in other cultures, it's not. It's like, where are you from? That's usually one of the first questions. Who's your family? So what name are you attached to? And that gets into old lineage and history and all, Redman of the Redman clan. It's funny, and only in Western culture is it like I'm tied to my profession, and which is good. Obviously, our professions tell a lot about us, because there's, obviously, to become a Navy SEAL, there's a very hard path to do that. But people are so much more than that. They're so complicated and layered and, fascinating.
Well, you could do big things too, right? When you get to know the human and the relationship, it's not just a transaction. I'm just not interested in you because you have an interesting story or you've done something in your past. We're interested because, I have your book, and I was going through it over the last couple of days, especially, and I've listened to so many podcasts, the leadership lessons, the objectives for overcoming in your life, things that just matter. I don't care if you're a 15-year-old child or you're a 55-year-old grown man. There are lessons that you are teaching that are amazing. And I feel like we'd be doing a disservice if I don't let you at least share a part of your story, because I think your story is so interesting and how you overcame is so amazing. So do you mind just giving our listeners a little bit of detail into your backstory and who you are, based on what you did, so that we can then go back into the human side of all those other parts?
Yeah, mine is it's a story of failure and redemption. That's really my story. And the good news in that is it's a story that so many people can relate to. I think a lot of people think, oh, Navy SEAL, elite, no fail mentality and things like that. And the reality is I failed at a pretty good level as a young leader. I did really well. And like many of us in this life, especially young men, I'm speaking to the young men and the men out there, because this is more of a male thing. I don't see it as often in females. That's why I say this. When we start to excel, especially at a young age, we tend to get a little ego and a little arrogant. And I started to do that. I started to think that I was really better than I was. And unfortunately, that led to my downfall. I did very well in the SEAL teams at a young age. I came in at a very young age. I actually joined the Navy at 17. I was only 18 and 19 years old when I went through SEAL training. excelled, made my way up to a lower level leadership position as a young enlisted SEAL, became a SEAL instructor, got recommended for a commission, became a SEAL officer, ranked very highly as I was doing these things, and then made mistakes and got consumed by ego and arrogance and kind of a perfect storm that I tell all the way through my first book, The Trident, and that led to the downfall and almost ended my career. I almost got myself kicked out. I almost killed myself. I put a gun in my mouth and convinced that it was the end of my life and my career. Thankfully did not, and started a new long path and a new journey, a leadership journey to redefine myself and figure out what it is to be an effective leader, especially in an organization that does not, lives are on the line with the decisions you make. And that started this whole new journey, rebuilt myself, rebuilt the trust and respect I needed. And
Jason,
and
would
got
you
everything.
say, I'm sorry to interrupt, I got to ask you this question. Would you say that that was a clean shift of going from the all about me mentality so many of us young men have to the it's bigger than me, it's something bigger than myself that I'm here to do and serve? Or and was that the kind of line in the sand?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we speak, we have a tendency to collapse timelines because we have to for time.
Right.
I will say it was an evolution. I recognized what needed to be done. I started to put things into place, but it was kind of a growth period over time.
Okay.
And obviously the concepts I now speak on stages and in my books are things that really developed in, clarity when you look back at it. But at the end of the day, figured it out, got back on course, everything was good. And then, of course, a defining moment was when I was severely wounded in a gunfight in Iraq. I was shot 8 times between my body and body armor by a large caliber PKM machine gun. The most intense firefight of my life. And I have teammates who went on to see a lot more combat after that. And they all said most intense gunfight they were ever in. And we ended up having to call in a air support mission from an AC-130 gunship up overhead that became the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war. It was extreme danger close. Somehow, knock on wood, we survived and came home very broken, very battered, facing the prospect of severe facial deformities, the prospect of having my arm amputated, the prospect of my military career ending, and just facing all this adversity. But I had learned the formula for success and the formula for leadership. And laying in that hospital bed, I realized, you know what, man, you followed this path multiple times, and it applies even in this hospital bed, and applied that formula. And that's how the sign on the door came to be, which, gained a lot of national recognition. And that's where we are today, how I took all that and, brought it forward to try and help others be better. I mean, that is my mission in this life now. How do I help the average everyday person to be better, be a better leader, be a better human, be a better mom, be a better dad, be a better business owner, whatever it is.
It's all about that growth trajectory that you're aiming to help people shorten the gap so they can actually make a bigger difference in their own lives and other people's along the way.
Yeah.
When you look at the moments, in battle or even getting out of battle, you're a family guy. You love your family. You love your wife. I mean, I know it. I've followed you on social media for a long time. I love the connection. Even during COVID, when you guys were together, there were times where you did some funny things together. What was there anything that you were thinking about predominantly in those moments, or did you have to stay so focused on staying alive that there was nothing else that you could think of? I'm just interested in that dynamic.
No, I would say in the end, you will always come back to family and those you love. As a guy who looked death in the face and thought that it was the end, and it's something I talk about. It's one of the, I speak on something called the 6 tenets of success. And one of those tenets is love greatly. you look how broken this world is we're living in. We're beat up with negativity. I think political leaders on both sides of the aisle have completely failed us. They're focused on sensationalism. They're focused on how different we are instead of how alike we are. They're focused on how to divide us instead of how to unite us. But in the end, at the end of the day, uh, we do things out of love. I fought for love of country. I fought for love of my teammates. I fought for love of my family, hoping that we could create a better future against some evil that we saw in the world. And I will tell you this, that we all work hard in this life to achieve things, whether it's status within a job, whether it's status financially, whether it's status with a house or a car or whatever it is. Let me tell you something. When you face death, none of that stuff matters. You don't look during your death. You don't say, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I was a Navy SEAL," or "I'm so glad I served at this level," or all you will think about is the people that you love and care about. And if you didn't put time and effort into those relationships, in the end, you will regret it and you will wish you had. And that's what I thought about in the end as I was laying there dying. How much I wish I had a little more time to tell my wife and my kids how much I loved them. And so not everything is about balance. So not to
Right.
say, hey, you should drop everything and, just, focus on those inner circles, but it is a balance. We have to put some time and effort into those areas because we never know when that day is coming.
I've heard it called, and I often refer to it as a eulogy virtue. And when you focus on eulogy virtues, I've had the honor of giving 4 eulogies for each of my grandparents. And I'm not good at a lot of things, but I was always a good communicator. And so I made myself available. And what's interesting as you say that exact thing is that when it comes to love, it's the fundamental purpose and point of any eulogy you ever give or speak about. How did they love? What kind of friend were they? Who did they impact? Who were the most important humans in their life? Almost, I mean, to a T, not one of them did I mention anything about what they did. It was all about who they were and what they loved and who they loved. And so powerful when you lead with love. I mean, the Beatles had it right. All you need is love. It was kind of a good concept, and I think you're just hammering that home.
It is. I mean, it's an amazing. This life is too short. There's so much anger and sensationalism in this world, and I people I coach with, I tell them ignore it. Stop watching the news. Get rid of people on social media who are just negative. This life is too short. This life is too short, man. Focus on, where you can make an impact and where you can be successful, and focus on the inner circle of people around you. Because yeah, we never know. We never know when that day is coming. The clock's always ticking against us.
Yeah, I feel like you and I talked about this briefly before we started, but we'd probably be remiss to not mention the fact that there was a major shooting right up the street in Hampton Roads, where you and I both have a lot of roots here in Virginia today, not far from where we've probably been 100 times. And I just would love. I feel like when you are talking, one of the things I noticed immediately upon this happening is people are spending way less time talking about the humans that passed on, way less about how to help their families, way less about the trauma, and way more about what they can do and how they can make it about themselves. And it's really, really frustrating to me. I don't know if you feel the same way, having been in scenarios where you've seen a lot more people pass on than most people in that capacity, dying for their country, giving everything they have. What's any insight on that and thoughts? Because I feel like it'd be worth having a short conversation just to honor those victims and the people that we should be thinking about today.
Yeah. So last night there was a shooting at a Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia. I actually was in Walmart, not that Walmart. I was in the one closer to where we live, and just a couple hours prior to that happening. And I was thinking about it this morning when I read the news, how, yeah, we never know when that day is coming. Those, poor individuals who now are gone, they did not go to Walmart thinking this could be my last day on this earth. And how sad it is that this demented individual went in there and gunned them down. And there's a lot of people that want to they'll try and turn this into a political thing. And they'll say, oh, it's because everybody has guns. We don't have a gun problem. We have a people problem. We have a perspective problem. All of that to be said, one of the things that I speak on, I want to take a step back, and you must have a mindset of protection. Gosh, man, we are living in dangerous times, and we are, crime is escalating all across. I mean, people are so quick to grab a gun and do something dangerous like that. So it's a mindset of protection. It's actually one of the 5 tenets that I speak on, how you lead a balanced life, that, you should have a mindset of protection. Men, women, I don't care who you are. The police can't be everywhere, and they can't be everywhere very quickly. And when things happen, they happen very fast, just like they did last night. I think all of that, I think the police were on scene in only a few minutes, but by the time they got there, everything was already done. So a mindset of protection, which is part of what I call an overcome mindset, a big thing that I speak on, is a critical thing in this day and age. And my hearts go out for the families. I cannot imagine as they're rolling into Thanksgiving. I mean, I think about, hey, man, it was right here in our neighborhood. That could have been my family. They could have been there. So a mindset of readiness is a key component of leadership in this life. And the mindset of denial of that'll never happen to me is an unrealistic view of the world. It is not an overcome mindset. It is an idealistic mindset, which is a dangerous mindset.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you talk about personal responsibility comes down to choice. It comes down to thinking through all levels of protection. And we cannot, obviously, those types of things are going to happen and they're horrible. But, and I don't know that you could even prepare for something like that. But at the end of the day, being prepared, knowing that it could happen, being aware, not putting yourself in certain situations. My dad used to have a saying, I'm sure your dad did too. Nothing good happens after midnight. And we got into our most fun after midnight in high school and into college, and the things that they told us were right. But there's so many aspects of that go with everything that we're doing. I don't even know when this occurred, to be honest with you. It happened so quickly that I got a notification from my company this morning. People were asking us if I've checked on everybody, and I was like, oh, it's 7:39. What are we? I don't know how to check on people right now. So I was just sending texts and hoping that we got a hold of some people that lived in and around that area. But I appreciate your message of protect, because I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, Scott, and you made the comment, I don't know how you could prepare for something like that. And when I talk about building an overcome mindset, there's 3 components. And part of, so the 3 components of an overcome mindset are awareness, preparation, and action. Those are the 3 components to build an overcome mindset. And the awareness piece is a big part. And sometimes it forces us to go into dark places that people don't want to go. No one wants to think about, well, oh my God, what would happen if I found myself in the center of a mass shooting scenario? People don't want to think about what would happen if someday I lost my spouse. What would happen if my spouse was diagnosed with a dangerous illness? What would happen if a member of my family was a victim of sexual assault or sexual trauma? Those are dark things, but we don't live in a perfect world. Bad things happen to good people. And part of an overcome mindset is awareness that these things could happen. Now we get into preparation. If we know these things could happen, how do we prepare for them? How do we train our family? How do we train ourselves to recognize and hopefully avoid these situations if possible? And there's all kinds of things that we can do with that. Obviously, the levels of preparation for the average everyday individual, they can do those things. But it's awareness and preparation. Then, of course, if you find yourself in that situation, the awareness and preparation enable us to take action. But there is a level of both training, there is a level of recognition that these things can happen that allow you to take action. You can't get to action without going through the first two steps. I frequently tell people you can't create an overcome mindset in a dangerous or crisis situation. It happens before.
Yeah, what a great lesson, and what an important, empowering message to help people really figure out the awareness in itself is a start, because a lot of people are so into their phones. They're so into they don't even know what's happening in and around them. I have been to gas stations where, you know, you're filling up your tank. And one time this happened to our own family. I'm filling up my tank and I run in to go grab something, and I run out and gas is pouring everywhere. It didn't shut off. My whole family was sitting in the car, completely unaware of what was happening. Everybody was watching a video or, you know, and I got out. I was like, guys, first of all, we're not in a great area, so we should have our heads out of our phones. Second of all, be aware. Like, did nobody hear the clicking and then the gas going everywhere? And, you know, it was very quick. I caught it pretty quick, but I was embarrassed. But I was really embarrassed as a father, because I needed to make sure my children and my family understood that that was a situation where we should be more aware of our surroundings. It was not the best scenario.
And we have to teach that, you know, I don't know how long ago. I mean, if you go back 300 or 400 years, we lived in much more dangerous times back then. You know, society has gotten complacent. I don't want to say, in some ways, soft. I mean, I will say soft, and it has to do with a lot of things. We coming out of World War II, Great Depression into World War II, America has seen probably the greatest growth and success of any country in the world. And that has given us a level of amazing opportunity and comfort, if you will. Well, with that comfort comes complacency, because we think, oh, we live in this perfectly safe place. The majority of the time, there are dangerous places in our country. And this has only exacerbated the problem, because like you said, everybody's sucked into this. We're immune because we don't think there's a threat. When the reality that threats are going up all across this country. I mean, the shooting that occurred last night in Walmart, and that are happening all across the country. I mean, there was a shooting at a club in Colorado Springs just a few nights prior to this. You know, God forbid, the shooting that occurred at the University of Virginia with the 3 football players this week. Situational awareness is awareness that, hey, bad things can happen to good people. Bad things can happen in good locations. We never know when it's going to happen. So having your head on a swivel and being aware of the scenario around you and thinking about, well, how do I get out of this situation? If something bad was to happen right now, where would I go?
Right.
What would I do? So
I spent more time than you understand. You probably don't, but I spent a lot of time as a child. We had a break-in when I was a child. I'm not going to go into the long story, but I had a babysitter, and someone broke into our home, and there was a sexual assault. I was a part in witnessing way too much. Actually went after the guy at one point in time, and spent the next 10 to 12 years trying to really calm and self-talk myself. How, you know, doors locked. I mean, the amount of things that I went through, I couldn't spend the night at a friend's house because nobody cared. They didn't care if windows were locked or doors were locked, and they didn't understand that it could happen. Yes. And when you understand that something can happen, it changes your perspective on everything. That individual broke into our home because the young babysitter mentioned to her best friend that she was going to be at X house, and she yelled it through the window, and her older brother, who was addicted to drugs and a very bad human, heard it. And so, you know, just telling someone you're out of town, like announcing to the world these things. And we check in everywhere that we're at. And so it is a challenging thing. Personally, I only, that's a very short version, because it's nothing compared to some of the trauma that's existed with people, you know, and what you've been through. But just an empathetic statement is all I'm making, is that I understand the feeling of that awareness. And then one other point, the founding fathers, I think it was John Adams, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and you go back on anything I've said, but they said that we are soldiers so our children can be teachers. so their children can be artists. And you and I both know, and you just alluded to it, when you create a generation of artists, you create a generation of creatives, and creatives are beautiful because the free mind is an amazing thing. And the generations before them created that level of freedom in their brain, the space. But a generation of artists will always have to become soldiers again.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. And sometimes you have to, I think, start to become the soldier now. So the awareness is crucial.
Yeah, there should be a balance in this life. And I'm going to come back to that point. You said that nothing compared to the trauma that potentially you or your friends have seen, and that's just not true. Trauma is trauma, regardless, you know, whether you see it on the battlefield, whether you see it as a kid because somebody broke into your house, and it is the same, regardless of what you've seen. The impact on the brain and the scars that it leaves, and overcoming it. Everyone has a different path on how we do that. But having that level of awareness that trauma can occur is a really big thing. So I really try and encourage people that are out there that, one, if you've been through trauma, A, you're not alone. B, you don't have to figure it out by yourself. And C, there is no easy button. But I will tell you this. There are a lot of people that have been through trauma that, you know, we get into some of the concepts that sit on the X, and the X is kind of the point of the attack, the crisis. There are a lot of people that just sit on that and feel sorry for themselves, and they're convinced they'll never get past it. And it starts with you. That's the reality. You have to be the one that drives forward. You have to be the one that has to accept that this bad thing happened. You have to be the one that figures out how to deal with it and come to grips with it, and then drive forward. I mean, it's that last component, action, that makes all the difference in this world. We are living in a victim society. Everybody wants to be a victim. If something bad happened to them, they want to be a victim. And they want to blame and point fingers at someone else and say, I'm broken and I deserve someone to come save me, whether it's the government or something else. And I will challenge that thinking and say that the most successful people out there are self-leaders. Despite the trauma they've been through, despite the adversity they've been through, they've figured out how to lead themselves forward. And there's no one who's super successful. And I don't define success by the amount of money you have in your bank account, because there are definitely people who are wealthy who were given wealth because their parent or other people before, you know, gave that to them.
Right.
I'm talking about people who grinded and achieved success, whether that's through a hard job, or whether it could be through wealth, it could be through whatever accomplishments. It was because they didn't sit there and feel sorry for themselves. So if you've been through trauma, don't ever compare to someone else. Don't say, oh, well, they've been through worse, so what happened to me is nothing, and I'm just going to swallow it and try and just deal with it. Man, you got to own it. You got to own it. You got to figure it out. Coming full circle to balance, I agree 1,000%. It's great to be a creative. In some ways, I have creative tendencies. I like to create content. I like to create things, but I also was a warrior first, and I learned how to be a warrior. And I think that there is a balance in this life. I think that there's 3 classes of society. And if none of you have ever read the book Atlas Shrugged, you absolutely should, through Ayn Rand. And this is where you actually, you know, and what's interesting is people that read it, you will have the people who say, oh, wow, I see the correlations. And then you have, you know, realists.
Right.
And then you have the people who will say, oh my God, that's so stupid, that'll never happen. Idealists. And what Ayn Rand talks about, she wrote that book in the 40s, and it was about a society where the society gets soft, and the society reaches the high point of civilization where, you know, if you look at America, probably, I'd say we hit that point probably 20 years ago or so. And we were booming. Everything was amazing. You know, the technology boom, the explosion in Silicon Valley, the digital revolution that occurred. And it led us down this path of having amazing things and the access to them. I mean, everybody in America now has a phone. I mean, we have government programs that enable people to have connectivity. And with this connectivity gives you opportunity. But in the book, what they talk about is there's basically producers, the people who work and have produced, and there are consumers, and there are people who have decided, well, I don't want to work, and I just, you people created great things, so I just want to live off the fruits of the labor that's happened. However you look at society, I mean, there's some levels of that. And when you have high levels of production, like you said, you allow for more teachers and you allow for more creatives, which is awesome. I mean,
right. We all want that you literally want that as a parent. If you don't want them, you do not want your children to go through what you went through,
right.
But you want them to have the lessons from what you went through so they don't have to go through it. Like it's not the other way around. You don't want them to experience it. I don't want my kids to feel what I felt growing up, but darn it, they need to know to lock the doors. And there's a reason why you do it.
Well, and they need to know how to protect.
Right.
I mean, there's 4 areas that I talk about. I call it the rule of P's. That you always should put time and effort into every single day. You should check one of these boxes. Number 1 is physical. Move your body. This machine that you were given at birth can do amazing things, and it'll take care of you. Taking care of it reaps rewards. Your immune system is better. You feel better. You have more energy. You are able to handle more stress. You're able to get more done. My fitness saved my life. Doctors told me that the amount of trauma my body sustained, if I had not been in the shape I was in, I probably would not have survived. Wow. Number 2, personal. We put so much time and effort into professional, endeavors, whether that's education or whether that's our job, but we have an entire personal life. And I watch all these people who take for granted the personal side of their lives, or they keep kicking the can down the road on the personal side of their lives. And that's a train wreck. But that's a big part of who we are. So you can't ignore it. You've got to take care. Don't ignore and don't take for granted the personal side of your lives, your family, and your relationships. Number 3 is professional. Put time and effort into it, man. Go big, think big, man. Go after those things.
Produce.
Yeah, produce. And we'll come back to that. Protection. This life we live in is dangerous, and you need to put protections in place, like you talked about. I mean, from the simple things like locking our doors or security systems to more complicated things like how do we protect our assets and our money through insurance and things like this. And then the last one is profit. Whether you like it or not, money is a necessity in this world. We need it to make things happen. And I was raised poor. We were poor. I never thought about money. I'll be honest. When I was in the military, I really didn't think about money. We lived paycheck to paycheck. And it was only when I got out of the military and I started running my own business and I met friends who were very, who had done very well for themselves, that I started to get smarter. And I started thinking about, man, how do I put my money to work? And now it's a daily thing for me. I look at, okay, how am I putting my money to work? And everyone should have a mindset of that, and I've met people who are like, man, I can't rub 2 dimes together to make a spark, a nickel. Right. And I'm like, well, guess what? If you put a penny in the bank and yield any kind of interest on it, that's a profit. That's a mindset of profit. And there are millions and millions of people who came here with nothing and set just a little bit aside, whatever they could, and it grew into amazing things. That's a mindset of profit. So all those things. And now, like you said, we come full circles: consumers, producers, and I add one additional category, the protectors. So in this day and age, where you should look at yourself and ask yourself, everybody's a consumer. I mean, we're all consumers. We consume information, we consume food, we consume energy, we consume all kinds of things. It's part of being human. But what level do you produce? What level do you produce? Do you work? That's production. You're providing a service to someone. I don't care what it is. If you're a server, you're producing, a service, to get food and to get, hopefully a pleasant experience as you're getting that food. If you are if you host a podcast, you're producing great content that people are getting that information. And then the last one, a protector. If you, at the end of the day, really, this is a message for men, but women too. You should always be thinking about, how will I protect my family? And when you think about that triad, consumers, producers, protectors, the question you should ask yourself, am I consuming more than those other two areas? That's an issue, because you're now lopsided and you're just sucking life energy without giving anything back. There's another term for it, and you guys aren't going to like it. It's parasite. That's what parasites do. They just consume off a host without giving anything in return. So in this life, if you want to be a good leader, if you want to be effective, those are the two areas you should be looking at. Am I producing through work, through effort, through being creative, whatever it is? And am I able to protect myself and my family and the things that I've built? And I think there are a lot of people who, unfortunately, all they look at is, what can I consume?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how simple it can be. The recipe for success is giving. If you're giving of yourself and your unique ability, what you're great at, it's actually pretty hard to not make a difference. It's pretty hard to not feel like you're producing. I don't care if you're the best, like you said, as a server. I served tables. I started from nothing as well. And to be honest with you, I loved it. We worked in a college restaurant where nobody got tips. And me and my buddy Greg got tips every night, made everybody angry. But we took that job as an honor to serve the people that were there. And I don't care if it was $20 at the end of the night. That was our beer money. It was if you go into anything with a unique ability that you're great at, you could be really special. Zig Ziglar said something that really turns your profit discussion. I love Zig Ziglar, who is an old sales guy and just unbelievable messenger and motivator. He said that if you want to have a successful business, you have to stop chasing money. That's the first thing. If you chase money, you'll never catch it. So money cannot be your God. But there's only three things that you have to do. Number one is you have to help people. Number two is you have to turn a profit. And number three is you have to trust in God or something bigger than yourself. And if you're not doing those three things, your business won't ever be successful. And so to your point, at the very least, a lot of young people come out with ideologies of changing the world and saving the world. And I love that. I think that you and everybody I interview on this podcast have that mentality, but there's one differential. They did something first. They went out to do something. And what you're talking about is so empowering to young people in general, because it literally hammers home what we know to be truth. Believe in something bigger than yourself. Give to the world. Don't be a parasite or a taker. Unbelievable. I love that, man. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Scott, absolutely. And I mean, my message to anyone, and it's the core of everything I speak and teach on. If you want to change the world, it starts with you. How do you lead yourself? How do you create structure and discipline into your life? How do you have conviction in your beliefs? How do you execute on them? Physically, personally, and professionally. That's how you're going to make a difference. It starts with you.
Yeah, that's huge. I want to ask you a question. You have obviously been at the edge of life and death. What are some of the things that you decided to change significantly in your life? Because the message of love, the message of hope, the message of investing in the humans that are most important to you, is there anything that's really, really changed dramatically? I mean, I'm sure everything has changed, but is there significantly something that stands out to you that was just an absolute change maker in your life after those moments?
I have tremendous, I would say two things. One is probably on the professional side, and the other one is on the personal side. On the personal side, I have tremendous perspective of life, and I'm very grateful. I recognize at any moment, I mean, I have now built two and working on three seven-figure companies. Um, but I recognize all that could be gone in the blink of an eye. The beautiful house I have, all that could be gone tomorrow. And I'm okay with that. I have lived poor before. Um, and the reality is I'm okay with it because it doesn't really matter. Um, at the end of the day, it's really relationships, man. Some of the best experiences of my life, I was sitting in nothing. It was in the jungle in the dead of the night in Colombia, laughing with friends as howler monkeys swung through the trees and threw poop at us. Um, it was, or Panama, not Colombia. It was, sitting on a rooftop in Afghanistan, smoking a cigar, celebrating the life of teammates who were no longer here. That took no money. We were in nothing. So I have a whole line of clothing and a motto, a part of my speech called "No Bad Days." And it's built around my skull, which is, on that artwork behind me. And I often look at that and think to myself, why am I still here? Um, you know, um, I was a good SEAL. At one point, I was a bad SEAL. I wasn't a great SEAL. I wasn't the best SEAL. I worked with some of the best SEALs that were out there. Some of those guys are gone. And I often think about, why am I still here and they're not? And when I look at that skull, it says to me, like, you got a second chance. Like, every day is a gift. And it gives me tremendous perspective. There are so many people I meet all the time who say, oh my God, I had a bad day. And when you actually talk to them, it's nothing. It's a schedule disruption. Their day just didn't unfold in the way they thought it was
Right.
going to. And that's a mindset. That's perspective. We talked about at the beginning, we have a perspective problem in this country. So I live my life now with the what's changed for me. Not to say that I don't have hard days or tough days. I get frustrated just like everybody else. I'm human. But I frequently will take a breath and a step back and just say, you know what, this is nothing in the grand scheme of things. Um, in the blip that is our lives, and literally the micro blip that is an hour or a day or even a season of your life, it's nothing. So embracing that and just saying, I live the motto of there's no bad days. If I'm alive, it's a good day. Whatever
Yeah.
problem you have, it's a gift because you're still alive to affect change. It means you can figure out a path to hopefully solve it or at least get around it. Um, when you're dead, you can no longer ever affect change on that problem. It's gone. It's the final act. And I think about that with my friends. They would give anything to still be here to try and solve or navigate whatever problem that any of us are facing. So that's probably one big thing, my perspective and my gratitude for what I have, the simple things. Um, the other thing is time. Um, I uh, I am, and I'll tell you, as I'm moving forward and getting a little older, I'm starting to get more protective of that. Um, I will never ever go work for someone ever again. And this is a thing with entrepreneurship because I don't ever, the greatest gift as an entrepreneur is I control my time. I choose what I want to do. And because it comes down to time, I don't want anybody else to tell me, hey, you got to clock in at this time or clock out at that time. Or, if I want to go do something, they tell me, oh, you can't do that. You have to do XYZ for
Right.
us. So that's probably one of the biggest things. And um, I want to control my own time. There's only so much time on this planet in this life. And if you're working for someone else, they're controlling your time. If you're working for yourself, don't get me wrong, you will put in a lot of hours. And I mean, there's an interesting dichotomy. Once I sign a contract for a company to come speak, I mean, technically
work.
their time is theirs, but
Right.
but ultimately I am making that decision. And, obviously, we navigate that. But so I would say those are the two things that I really look at now that I came so close.
Those are great. You know, I think you find that entrepreneurs often are people that have dealt with severe trauma in their life at some point in time and had to overcome, to your message. And so in all these entrepreneur groups that you and I have been a part of, whether you're speaking at them or you're taking part in them or learning from them as fellow business owners, you find this mentality where that is freedom to them when they actually found the path of understanding that they can control their own time. They can control who they put first. They can control where they invest. It's freedom.
Yes.
And then you mentioned something else, which I want to go back and just point out real briefly for everyone listening. And that is, you don't care at the end of the day if it all goes away, because you know it wasn't worth anything more than the things that you always still have. And like, I mean, that's a very powerful thing. When money drives somebody, it takes them away from the path of where they're going. You know, it's so important and such a great point.
It's stuff. That's what in one of my speeches, I talk about it. It's stuff. And I'll tell you this, that when I lay there bleeding out on the battlefield, and I thought to myself, this is it. This is where I check out. You know, 35, almost 40-minute gunfight that I was shot pretty severely in the first 5 minutes. And I lay there bleeding out for 25, 30 minutes before my guys were able to get forward. My team leader moved forward and got a tourniquet on me to save my life. In that time frame, I did not think about my stuff. I had a nice Ford F-150 truck. I had a Harley Davidson motorcycle that I like to ride. You know, I didn't think about any of that stuff. I didn't think about what's my bank account doing. You don't care. All you'll care about is the people that you loved, and you will look back. I don't want to say my life flashed before my eyes, but I will tell you, I thought about the things that I had not accomplished, that I had procrastinated or I just hadn't gone after, and I regretted that I hadn't gone after them sooner. I thought about things I had done that I regretted. Things, you know, we all carry our own internal skeletons, and the things that I had done that I wish I had not done. And I just thought about how I wished I could have told my wife and kids one more time I love them. So at the end of the day, stuff's awesome. Trust me. I mean, I love my stuff. I mean, I want some more stuff. But I also recognize that stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's just a great message, because I think that you get a lot of different listeners. You get people that are interested in the story of how you overcame as a Navy SEAL in that moment. You get people that have seen you grow and teach and help empower people into the future. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this type of message. And, you know, it's important to not get caught up in the things that don't make you who you are and what you stand for. You get really dialed into your principles and your values, which you put on the wall behind you, along with your skull and your motto, no bad days. These are things that help you live. That's the ultimate self-talk. It sounds to me like self-talk has been one of the most important things that you've utilized in this challenge from start to finish.
100%. But I got to tell you this, it's got to be self-talk that you unequivocally believe in. You know, in the third book I wrote, The Point Man Planner, we talk about living by mission. You know, mission equals purpose. That sign on the door was literally a written mission statement that I have lived by. And there's three components of it. You know, number one, do you believe it? Number two, are you believable? When you tell other people, are you believable? Do you have conviction and passion when you tell someone, or do people see right through you and go, yeah, that's, you know, you may be saying that. And then the third part, do you live it? You know, do people watch and you live it day in and day out? True story. When I was a new officer, I printed off, like, I made this plaque and it had all these high level quotes from, you know, these great leaders throughout history. And, but I wasn't living it. I wasn't living it. I was a hypocrite. And, that's the thing. So if you find things that motivate and inspire you, if you have that inner dialogue, I mean, now I mean, these things that I use, that anything that I have written in my books or anything I teach, I tell people they're things that I've used. So they may work for you, they may not, but they
Right.
work for me. And I know it's true. I can't tell you how often I have to tell myself, man, you got to get off this X, this little micro ambush in your mind. Or, hey, man, today was a miserable day, but guess what, baby? No bad days. You're still alive. Tomorrow, when you wake up, that means we can deal with this problem again, as opposed to the alternative. So whatever you hang on to, you have to believe it. It may be things I teach, but maybe the things I teach don't correlate with you. It may be something Zig Ziglar teaches, or it may be something Tony Robbins teaches, or it may be something that I don't know, whoever else is out there, that you can relate to and you can grab onto in those hardest moments. And it allows you to grind through that storm, because at the end of the day, that's what this life is about. You know, it's hard to be a human. And I think it's even harder in this day and age we're living in. I often think about George Washington is a huge inspiration for me, and probably one of the most amazing leaders. And I think about during the period of the Revolutionary War, especially the winter at Valley Forge, where everyone doubted Washington. Even his own friends were questioning his leadership and our ability. The Continental Congress was questioning him. And he was like the reluctant leader, man. He did not want to be there. He just wanted to go back to
his farm.
His home.
Yeah.
Which I'm totally blanking on right now.
I am too, but that's okay. It's because we're so into the story. I'm listening and you're telling it. So keep going. I love it.
But it was his conviction that really, and it was such a fundamental, we would not have a country if it wasn't for Washington's conviction through all that. And I think about that. But I also think about how hard that was, but I also wonder if life was so much easier then in some ways. We didn't have all the distractions. Information didn't flow at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We weren't inundated. I mean, look up anything online, and on one side, you'll have some person telling you it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And on the other side, even with scientific backing, they'll tell you, oh yeah, it's the most horrible thing ever. So we live in this most confusing, information monsoon that I think makes life very difficult. Whereas I would think in Washington's time, despite how difficult it was, there was more time to think. He had to write a letter and say, this is what we're going to do. It would probably take at a minimum a week, if not a couple of weeks, for that letter to get to its source and then for them to respond. It gave him a lot of time to digest and formulate a plan and a strategy. I think about that a lot, because in this day and age, we live in this massive frenetic world where I think leaders specifically feel like, oh my God, I have to make a decision immediately. And I don't know if that's always true. So anyways,
I love it, because information, one of the challenges to that point is when information is so readily available and you can look up anything, there is an answer for everything. It just might not be your answer. Yeah. So the thing is, until you go inward, there are challenges we worked on in our company where I've had people be like, hey, what takes you so long to make a decision? And I know it's not the right answer. And maybe there are pathways. Maybe there are, other people who have done it this way. But until I can think it through, and I think in a loud world, what you're bringing up is super important. And that is we're distracted. There's this loud horn at all times, the television, the phone, the computer, the podcast, the everything, right? Sometimes it all has to turn off, and the only thing you can think about is what's in your head, and actually get comfortable there. Because when you're comfortable there, we get to make the best decisions. And that's obviously what Washington was doing. He was comfortable in his own skin, his thought, his independent ability to not navigate what everyone else wanted him to do, but what was most important. And that's leadership. And, if I'll give you a chance if you want to. I asked you in the beginning if there was anything, any short story you've never shared before, or something that might stand out. And I'll add one more thing. Maybe there is a person that you work side by side with that you've never had the chance to honor or tell their story, or something about them that you'd like to do. But as we end this, I feel like that would be a cool dynamic. Anything come to your brain? Anything that I'll try to continue to talk a minute to make sure that I think I'm just thinking you've done so much great media. Like anyone listening, if they were listening to this, there's one thing that would be new today. That's totally different.
Man, man, I've lived an amazing life. I've probably lived 2 lifetimes.
Let me ask this question then. I have one more follow-up and then it's easy. The last question is, when it comes to thinking of moments of freedom, you fought for this country's freedom. You sacrificed for this country's freedom. Your brothers have sacrificed significantly for this country's freedom. When you think of moments of freedom, just give me an idea and give our listeners an idea of what comes to your brain. You know, I asked somebody one time this question, and they said they could remember speaking at the Grand Canyon as the sun rose, and they had this unbelievable endorphin rush of just like, this is so amazing, and it was such a feeling of freedom for them. So just anything that you think of that symbolizes levels of freedom in your brain.
You know, freedom is such a gift that I think so many Americans take for granted. It's something that I frequently think about. And there is a trade-off between freedom and comfort. And right now, we're in a strange time in our country where there are a lot of people who are willing to give up freedom for comfort. There's this strange thing that's happening within social media where people are being censored, and this cancel culture that's occurring where people say, well, I don't like what this person's saying, so we should be canceled. And I disagree with that. I think whether you like it or not doesn't really matter. I think that's part of freedom of speech. And so when you think about freedom, you have to think about it all across the board, that what you like and what you don't like. And because someday, even though you dislike this, someday, you know, if you continue to allow that to occur, this censorship that potentially is happening, and it's on both sides, guys. I'm not one that says, hey, you know, these group of people should be able to say something and these don't, because that's what's starting to happen. And whoever is in political control seems to allow things to happen. And I'm not, guys, I am not a fan of, I have lost faith in both sides of the aisle. And I definitely am leaning towards both libertarian and independent in this day and age. But at the end of the day, freedom is about opportunity. Freedom is about your ability to voice your opinion without fear of punishment or repercussion. And there's a lot of that's not happening. And there's a lot of people that are watching it occur. And if you don't like what is being censored, you're in favor of it. You're like, yeah, this is great. I don't want to have to hear that. I don't like that. But I encourage you to take a step back and look at it through the lens of freedom. In this life, we're not always going to like things that are put out, but challenge your beliefs. And maybe you come full circle and say, okay, I still don't like that. That's okay. But at the end of the day, humans are complicated, and humans, you know, we have strange belief systems at times. So as long as it doesn't create violence, or it doesn't create a negative impact on, and when I mean negative, meaning probably negative physical impact, then it should be out there, because that is freedom. So when I think about freedom and I look at that flag, that's what I think about. I am not, this is a controversial thing, but I understand why Colin Kaepernick kneeled during the national anthem. I don't like it. And I don't like it for a whole bunch of reasons. I understand it, and you live in, and I even can say I support his right to do it, because we live in a country that is free. and the flag is merely a representation of that country. The downside of that is there are a lot of places in the world that he would not be able to play that game and be paid at the amazing level that he is paid to do so, to follow his dreams and excel in a sport that he was gifted at and that he has been very well rewarded for. You know, America is one of the few countries that would have given him the path and that freedom to do that, no matter how faulted he wants to believe parts of our country are. And it hurt me to watch that, because I've had so many friends that have been draped under that flag to fly home who fought for his right to kneel. So I just wish that, you know, whenever I see that, I wish that there was I applaud, part of our Constitution is the right to assemble and protest, and I support that 100%. But I do feel like sometimes I have a hard time with that one. Because I love this country. I love what that flag represents. So those are some of my thoughts on freedom.
That's great. Well, listen, I gotta end it here with this comment. Number one, I'm honored to have you on this show, to be able to share your input, to share this area with you, you know, living in the same community. But most of all, your message is one of victory, not of victimhood, and to provide a level of influence for people to drive facing forward. When you drive in your steering wheel and you look forward, that's what your message is, not to stand in the rearview mirror. You have to acknowledge what's in the rearview mirror, but you're driving forward. And I love that. So what I want to know for all of our listeners before we end is, how do they find you? How do they gain help from you? How do you speak to their audience? What are some of the things that they can do to get more of you? And I'm, again, thank you so much for being here. Just share us with that one part.
Yeah, you can go to jasonredman.com, redman.com. And from there, it'll if you click on speaking, you can book me for speaking engagements. I am doing coaching, but I'm revamping my coaching to only do I've got some group coaching, and we're launching that new program. And then I'm doing really high level executive coaching in 2023. And then of course we got our books, and we're launching 2 new online courses here shortly. So how to build an overcome mindset and how to be a point man for your own life. So these are all the things on our website. And so yeah, jasonredman.com.
Well, I'm glad that art stands behind you and you are alive to help all these people with the message that you bring to them. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.